Now we had time to work on this today. We got the tissue on, we got 2 coats of clear, and it's time to grind away at all these little edges with a sanding block and some sandpaper. I want it to go up close so you could see what all of these wrinkles, that they look terrible at this point in time, but they're all going to sand out. When they're all done, if you just keep grinding away at them, but the key is to let it dry. In our case, this is dried about, I don't know, 8 hours, 9 hours or something. Anyway. But what'll be nice here is if we can get this sanded out, get a couple more coats of clear, get it drying, then that'll dry overnight. Tomorrow we can really grind away at it even more. The trick is not to get the coats on one right after another. Have some dry time in between. And once you do that, it just makes the job go a lot easier. And when you can see the stuff powdering off and flaking off, if it's not powdering off, what it's telling you is it's not really dry. It's got to turn to powder when you sand it. And as always, the most important thing. Javalia. And the biggest thing we have here are the wrinkles in the nose. On all the spots that are flat, what I want to do is use a sanding block. Now I don't want to go through and tear out pieces of tissue. I don't want to remove the tissue. At this point in time, I just want to knock down the high spots. Maybe get one other coat of clear on this today. At the end of that, tomorrow when we come back to the shop, every day that we can just get something drying, we're just so much ahead of the game. Now all these spots that are flat, I'm trying to use a block on, just so it takes down the high spots without tearing out chunks of material. Because it's very easy at this point, it's way too easy in fact, to just go right through back down the raw wood, and we don't want to do that. And each time we want to kiss the edges, just touch them. And each time we go through this cycle of put a coat of dope on, or 2 coats, depending on how thick it is, knock down the high edges, and around here, of course, we've got some wrinkles around where these tubes stick out. And I wanted to get that area like kind of semi-finished where the cockpit's going to be. It's coming up very soon that we're going to be doing the cockpit details on this. Always around the edges, anywhere that it's going to tend to make an edge that we don't want to peel. Bottom's relatively flat, so that's easy to just block sand out. That is a fine line between sanding too much, and in case of this, we just want to put a radius here so I don't have paint peeling up. Nobody's going to see that except if the wings are off the plane. It'll just keep the finish from peeling up. Now the flats always seem to sand out relatively quick. Now the hard part is up by the nose here, and this is going to take some time because we have a little reverse curve in there. Again, I want to get the wrinkle out, or as much of it out. And it's not a good idea to try to do this all in one shot. It's easier to get say 50% of it out, put another coat of dope on it, let it dry overnight. Because every time you let it dry, the dope, and that dope, you can see the dope is powdering off now. That's exactly what we want, is powder. Anyway, we got this part, we got the cowl. We're going to actually spend whatever time it takes to get this detailed out. Ooh, that's starting to feel nice. And every time you do it, it just gets a little smoother. Next coat, the wrinkles will kind of sink back down into the dope. Next coat, they'll sink back down. And at some point in time, we will have no wrinkles on this at all. We actually did this whole thing on the last video in one piece of tissue. That was pretty amazing to me. But we will work on this. I will sand this until it's ready for the next coat of dope. Now I guess by the time you see this video it won't really matter, but Kent Tyser, who just finished up his new shop and he's anxious to start building, and he's got a secret project he's building. I promised I wouldn't let the cat out of the bag on video, but he's got a secret thing going on there. This morning he woke up and there was 13 inches of snow in North Carolina. So I'm not so sure now, because the poor guys have had snow down in Houston. It's getting to be a hard act to follow with this winter. But boy, when I look back at this in the summer, when I'm playing these videos and we're sitting here doing something else or painting that plane for the circle burners or whatever, I just look back and I think, I can never remember a colder winter than this. My God, it's unbelievable. But boy, when summer comes, am I going to be glad to get my fat buns down at Daytona and VSC. I've had it with this. I have really had it. Anyway, we're coming up on a time ready to put the clear, next coat of clear on this. Ready to put some more clear on the cowl. But the point I wanted to make is, if you get this part of the detail sanding, if you can feel a tissue wrinkle, you got to sand it. The test is, you rub your hand on it and look at the clock or something. I can feel it right there. Usually where you're going to feel it is a wrinkle, a glue seam, or an edge. But if you get used to that thing of constantly feeling, at this point in the finish in building a substrate, your hands are 100 times better than trying to do this by eye. Your eye doesn't see anything. Your eye can be fooled. It's like a magic trick. You look at something that's the color of balsa wood and the color of tissue, and you can't see a high spot. You can't see a low spot. It's just hopeless. But your hands cannot be fooled. Anyway, we are ready. And see if you can. Now, I can't feel that at all. If I close my eyes, I can't feel anything here. But you'll see when we get the next coat of dope on that, it's going to come 1 or 2 more coats, and that's going to be ready for, a basic substrate. Now, at some point in time, when I put this coat of clear on, and it's going to be starting with this coat, I'm looking for. I've almost gotten rid of all the wrinkles by now. And if I've gone through in any spot that I'm down to just having a hunk of raw wood, I can put a little tissue patch, bury it in clear, and in a couple of coats, you're never going to see it. You can get a real nice look at how that's going to be. And this will dry up in the next day or so. But here's the good news. While this is drying up, we could be doing other work. In our case, we got email, we got shop work, we're doing just crazy stuff up. Our bathroom is turning out to be a way bigger project than we originally thought, but we're going to tough it out. And as soon as we have some progress, we'll show it up on video, of course. But like all plans of mice and men, starts out being pretty easy, gets complicated. It's complicated in a hurry, in fact. And once I have this coat on, I'm pretty much, and I'll get the cowl and that little hatch, and I've got pretty much a good bite into the substrate of this. This is going to need a couple of more coats, I'm sure, but because it's so cold out there, we're getting a lot of shop hours in per day, where normally we'd have work outside to do. The only work we're doing is chopping ice. And little by little, that is really starting to come around. Well, every time we get a coat on that and get a little more sanding on it, boy, it's really starting to come out nice now. Now, the last time I sanded this, there was no hint at all of wrinkles in that. And that's going to be the basis of, I think, a really good substrate very, very soon. Here, our cowl's drying up, our hatch is drying up. Now that we've got everything drying, we can jump on to the other part of the daily work. Now, while we're waiting for our dope to dry, and I'm trying to take care of the business issues of the day, this email came in, and this is absolutely one of the best. There are some very nostalgic, everybody knows, both Joe Adamusco and I are just crazy about Reno air races. This gives a little bit of the history of the Reno air races. Check this out, it's really pretty cool. I think, but I'm not sure because I have to read this, there's some captions with it, that these they originated in Cleveland as the Cleveland air races, if I remember right. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I'm going to have to read this. It's a lengthy email. But it's interesting stuff. May give you some inspiration to build a Reno air race model. Now, I can tell you, and this I will never forget this as long as I live. There was one time in my life, and only once, where, and I don't remember if it was 3 or 5 or 1, B-36s flew over the house that we lived in. And as a kid, I can still remember the sound and looking up and saying, oh my God. And I've been a lifelong fan of the B-36 since then. It stayed with me forever. There's just some fantastic nostalgic photos. Look at a P-38 down there. And this was in a time when the world just revolved around propeller-driven aircraft. Even though there were jets, I never remember being mesmerized by jets at all. Not sure why. Look at that P-39 on the ground. Boy, what a great set of photos. This really inspires me. When I see stuff like this and I think, boy, there's a chance this will live on. The Acrojets, led by Major Howard Swede Jensen, put their shooting stars through Immelman turns, Cuban 8s, and other maneuvers. I'll bet every one of these guys built model planes when he was a kid. Every one. That's a really safe bet. That's funny to remember these things. As a kid, I can remember this. It's just, no. I spent my summers out on Long Island in my grandmother's store, which was about, just a few miles from Mitchell Field, and there'd be all kind of military stuff going on in Mitchell Field. I think right now Mitchell Field is not only not operational, it's probably condos or something we can't live without. Now here's a funny story. You may think I'm making this up. I'm not. I beat this guy to the punch. Before there ever was a Tommy Boyd Batman. See this outfit he's got on? Now I was probably legit. I was probably, I don't know, 10 years old or something. And we had an apple tree in our backyard. And what I did is I used to watch Flash Gordon as a kid. And I used to see this thing, Ming the Merciless, where they could just fly with this cape. So I made a cape, and instead of M for Ming, it was W for Windy, and I jumped out of the tree just as my mother was pulling in the driveway, and of course I got all beat up. I didn't fly at all, and I was so disappointed that I couldn't fly like they do on TV. That's honest to God, that's a true story. And my mother never let me forget it. She would retell that story at the most embarrassing times of my life. Look at the nice trophy they had. That looked like it's hand carved or something. That plane is part of the trophy. Joe DiBana, victory smile. What a beautiful trophy that is. Wow. And there's Joe DiBana's plane. Now I know the reality is right after World War II, these things were available for the price of the scrap aluminum. So unlike today where you have to be Donald Trump to buy a rudder pedal, or God forbid a motor or a prop, forget it. Stan Reaver's model. Not model, it's a real plane. Early model Mustang. A nice paintwork on it too. Kind of a nice little Reno kind of paint job. Now I'm sure these early Reno type racers were not highly modified. They were just buying them up and painting them and whatever. But not like the Stragas and the Dago Reds and all of the modern ones. Now see, some of these I had never seen before. And I have many Reno Air Race books that go, oh my God, way back. They even have the Red Baron in them. But I had never seen some of these models. A really unusual one, Donald Bussart's, number 81. All wood Mosquito. I guess they were racing A26s back then. I don't know. This guy's got a number on her side. Maybe they were. I don't think they. I know they've raced the Tiger Cat at Reno. Not this year, but a couple of years ago. In fact, I got pictures of it from several people. That would be cool seeing that come around the pylons. These were really dangerous planes to fly. I have the factory. In fact, it's been on the video more than once, even I think. The factory training manual for these of how many things you have to do on a checklist, and if you skip even one of them, but you know the left engine cuts out, you may as well just throw the stick right out the window and stuff. Dangerous plane to fly, I know that. Vince Perron. Look at this wheel spats on this. It's pretty neat. But these look like what they did is they just took, you know, scrap aluminum planes that still had time on the engine and didn't have any war damage, and go out and have it. You know what this is the equivalent of? If when I was a kid you could go drag racing. You could borrow your mother's car, get a set of ball tires, and go to the drags and have a good time, and maybe even, God forbid, win a trophy now and then. Put the street tire back on or whatever, and it was cheap and it was fun. Go drag racing now and see what it cost. Ron Puckett's Corsair. Imagine being able to buy these things for the cost of scrap aluminum. Jeez. And how many there were. At the end of World War II, there were, I guess there are still some out in Arizona, maybe, and Brookins has told me there's some place out there where there's thousands of B-29s and Warbirds and everything sitting out in the desert. We're going to definitely try to see that while we're out at VSC. Bill Odom. Now, I remember Bill Odom because Tommy Niebuhr, when he was up in our area, was building a model, or wanted to build a model of this exact Mustang. He had documentation and everything. Charles Tucker. Look at the exhaust stain. You don't think they were running that motor, Rich? Turn the boost up, no problem. We blow the engine, it's only $100 in the junkyard. Now imagine how many of those engines they had left over at the end of World War II. Holy crow. Steve Beeville. Oh, what good memories this is. This really makes my day complete. Sometimes I just think this is someday going to all be lost, and like my kids, they don't know what a Reno Air Racer is unless it was on MTV, but that somebody has even preserved the pictures is so good. Now, the only caption I have with this one is Frank. Look at that canopy. You notice that little scoop behind the cockpit? That's where I got the idea for the sweeper. Sweeper had that little detail. Not sure you can see it in that photo, but that little scoop is right behind the cockpit. Ken Cooley. Now remember, these are the early versions. This is really the history of the event that's unfolding here in this email. This is the ultimate. This is M.W. Fairbrother. Look at where he's building this thing. Look, there's a house right behind it. He's got this thing in his backyard with a stepladder you use to clean gutters. Holy mackerel. Is that ever wild? I'd love to have that in my backyard. I'd be willing to give up the pond. A.T. Whiteside. Now I remember Billy Simons had a really cool version of this. That's still a really slick looking plane with a lot of choices of paint job. But they have these in orange and warbird, and look at the cockpit detail. It was like a car door to get in and out of the cockpit. Engine, the drive shaft went right through the pilot's legs like he was sitting on a drive shaft. Imagine if the universal joint let go. Ooh. And the Russian Air Force, I think, wound up with most of them. James Harp. These would even make a great scale model, and the reason is, look at where the gear is. That would taxi like a baby carriage. Unlike a Corsair or some of the scale models that constantly want to nose over. Wilson Newhall's number 65. They hadn't gotten into the exotic paint job thing, making them into like funny cars, and I guess they started out. This was a budget thing at one time that maybe, heaven forbid, an average person or a little bit above average person could participate in. And I wonder, I'm thinking gas might have been a quarter a gallon or something too, might have changed the whole program. Fantastic. Look at the exhaust. Oh man, is that nice. It was really cool Corsair that Kurt Mullinex had a couple of years back. Maybe not a couple of them, but a few years back. Super, super nice model. Now I know they've raced just a few Spitfires. And I had, in one of the books I have, there's even color pictures of one of them that raced. But most of the Brits, I think they basically wanted to keep them. This one's got a Griffin 5-blade. They wanted to keep them as a war, I don't know, well, not warbirds would not be the right word, but want to keep them looking like warbirds anyway. And this one obviously has a nice little, custom little paint job up in the front. J.H.G. MacArthur. And Jack Hardwick has a similar paint job to Lefty Gardner, who we've got on many videos. We've got them, well, many anyway. Lefty Gardner's a staple at Reno. James Hannon. J.P. Hagerstrom. Look at this. Now Billy, I know, he's dreaming about this twin. I know he's all psyched up about it. And he's torn between making it like a P-38 with a body in the middle and two booms. And he's not, I'm not sure he's real happy, but he's home today cutting up cardboard to make a full-scale replica, not particle board, that foam board. I told him make a big full-size model from that sketch. Now we'll see what he comes up with. Apparently the P-38, you can see the P-38 counter-rotating props here. Nice cowling treatment right there. And Whitman Special. Look at the size of this plane. Now look at it. Look at the size of the guy. Whenever you see these in real life, and we saw these down at Uvar Hazy, they're incredibly small. This even looks bigger here in this picture than it does in real life. You look at it in real life and you think it could be an RC model. And of course they make great stunt ships. Any one of these little race planes, almost perfect for making a semi-scale stunner. Steve Whitman. Again, what always blows me away is the size. So small. Look how thin that wing is. Not exactly a stunt airfoil. That is definitely a thin wing. Now this gentleman fished salmon. We've seen his Mustang. He must have had some dough. You know what I would love to see? I would love to see one of these models with no covering on it and no skins, just to see how they're made. Look at that spinner. That nose that's a beautiful nose section. Now look how high the tail is. That's unique for this era. Look how high the stab is up on the rudder on this one. That's unique because none of the other ones that I've seen so far have that. And these are planes that were flown by women. They had a women's race back then. I remember a lot of these women were ferry pilots during the war, so they had oodles of time behind the stick delivering planes. It was not an unusual thing for a woman to be a pilot. Catherine Landry. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. Ron Puckett's Corsair. Clipped wing Corsair. Excuse me, with the big engine. Whoa, 4-blade. Oh my. And a bubble canopy. Whoa. Cook Cleveland. Look at the exhaust stains coming out. Another big engine. Clipped, yep, clipped wing. Boy, and if you can't find a paint job you like among this group, holy moly. He's got something going on, some kind of special supercharger or something going on over the top of the cowl. I remember when Banjock did the Suzy Q, he had all this documentation for the paint job, and Suzy Q was the slowest plane to ever win Reno, or something like that anyway. And Banjock was so impressed with the story of this Miss Suzy Q. Look at the way the door opens on a canopy, that's very cool. Now you wonder how many of these P-51s still exist, that guys have bought them up and repainted them and whatever. Early model one like the one John Cafaro has been modeling. This is John Cafaro's favorite model of a Mustang. And Bill Odom again with the tip tanks. And that's a flyover you'll never see again because there's only one, as far as I know. There were 3. I think there's only one left, Phoebe. Charles Tucker again. That's a nice looking design. In real life, I'll bet it's even cool looking. Now this must be the radar version of the P-38, that where they had the radar up in the front. I'm not sure. Batty Bitty. That's a nice paint job. Heck, the trouble with me is I'm not going to live long enough to build all the planes that I think are cool. Jim Harp's Air Cobra. This is actually a King Cobra. It's a 63. By the way, for anybody that doesn't know, Rich Oliver is building a Raby P-51 for VSC. We're going to see him out there. He's excited about it. We may even get to fly it down there. A color picture of that Spitfire. Five blade. Oh my God, I was mesmerized by 5-blade props for many, many years. I made the mold, I made the props, I got official flights at the Nats with them. Shame on me. Model every one of us know, the Buster. You know, it looks like he's got duct tape or something holding that one wheel pant together. I don't know. Look at how the rudder has aerodynamically closed in by the tail wheel. Nice little touch. Like an old Olympic, the original Olympic. Bob Gildini's Olympic had something similar to that. And John Brodak's favorite plane, the Shoestring. Unusual paint job, wing wax. Look at a paint job on the spinner even, and that unusual cowl shape. A women's race again. I'm not sure they still have a women's race, but apparently at one time they did. Look at the cockpit on this guy. Another one from the women's race. Very unusual cockpit detailing there. Betty Skelton's entry. Cook Cleland. Look at the clip tips on that guy. Whoa. Whoa. Well, we hope you've enjoyed sharing some of these Reno photos. This has been a special treat for me. I think it's a special group of aircraft that comprise the Reno Air Race. And every time I learn more about the history of the event and how it evolved, and having all those Skyfire videos only makes me more interested in it. And every time I see these photos, I just hope some people preserve some of these for future generations. See the musical notes going down the fuselage on the beginning, and the musical notes out on the wingtip. And I remember Tommy Niebuhr wanting to build that as a stunner and having prints and plans and documentation. Anyway, that has really been a special treat. That has really made my day complete. Our dope is drying, and we're going to get back to the shop tomorrow. Get a nice fresh cup of coffee going, chop the ice. We're closing in on having this guy, all the woodwork finished. I hope in the next at least week or so, get the woodwork finished. And I'll see you tomorrow. Now today, after chopping away and chopping, I thought today was going to be kind of an ordinary day. Well, it turned out to be a landmark day for Karen and I. As we were doing our bathroom renovation, one of the things that held us up was finding the right granite. Well, we finally, and I'm going to try to show this on the, this is the granite that Karen picked out. It's got some little, I don't know, sparkles or something in it. And it's made with broken glass and granite. And it's a polymer, and it's made to be, well, it's made to be glass is what it is. And as I look at it, Karen was really happy. You don't see it on the video, but we had gone to every granite yard in the whole of North Jersey before we found this. And this, we are just in love with this. And the countertop that we ordered is going to be ready for us the day we get back from VSC. So just thought I'd mention that. And as a side benefit, it matches my R1. But that is nice material. I don't know. I'm not sure you can see it with the sun hitting it. Oh boy, it's chunks of broken glass in a polymer. And the contractor gave us this little sample to take home to look at. But the most important thing is Karen really likes it. And now instead of looking in granite yards for the rest of the day, I can go down there and work on a big job. You can't imagine how happy Karen is with that granite. And boy, does that, I was really getting nervous that we were going to go and have to compromise on something we really didn't like. Because again, we've got this really fancy wallpaper and Victorian this and that and whatever. She's a happy wife. Now, today what I want to do, I'm looking at this part and I want to show this. Once I have a shine on this, I'm pretty much ready to sand this and spray some silver. So I don't think I'm going to need another coat on this, but it would be nice because it really isn't much below freezing out there right now. And I thought if I could sand some of these parts and get them in silver today, boy, what an upgrade that would be. Anyway, we really got caught up in this bathroom renovation. It started out to be a very simple thing, and it involved, when it's done, we'll put it up on the video because it's a mess up there now. But it's coming, baby. I'm coming. Now, what I wanted to show, sanding out the last coat of clear. All you need to ever know is that you have dust. When you have dust, the dust tells you Brodak dope is ready to sand. Once you have that it's dry to this point, you can do the final sanding, and I'm using 320. Let's see if you can read the number on it. I'm going to sand all the parts, final sand them out, and it'll take a while. I want to be very detail oriented. I want to get around all the edges, all the corners, all around the lips and scoops and everything. But once this is done, unless it gets darker, unless the phone starts ringing off the hook, which from time to time it can happen, what's going to happen is we will have a coat of silver on this tonight. And then tomorrow we can start on a tail. And boy, will I be happy about that. Whoa. That would be 2 home runs in one day. But remember, the key thing, powder. Once you see powder, you're good to go. Now the other part that I always emphasize is every time when you start the rough sanding is just knocking everything down to the basic shape. Then at each sanding should be more and more detailed right up until we do the first coat of silver. And then the real detail sanding with 600 sandpaper is going to start. But right now, I don't want to have even a single edge, a single corner that's not detail sanded. And I have all those sanding tools to get in this corner and that edge and this angle, and I will be using them all. And if this runs to where, and sometimes it does, to where it runs extra hours, I don't care. I'll just do it tomorrow. But I don't want to compromise it. And this is what happened with this bathroom renovation. We started out wanting something totally crazy. And then when we got the final prices on everything, I said, oh, yeah. Even with me doing all the labor, it was just too much. Well, now it's down to where it's something we're going to enjoy and something that's a human price. And, you know, I'll be real happy when that's done. Believe me. In the meantime, if I get some silver on this today, boy, will I be just cruising. I'll be happy as can be. Because each time, now I got to spend the whole day making a tail, but what I want is while I'm making a tail, I want something to be drying. That's the whole key in a nutshell. And sometimes that's hard for people to understand. Now, it's not like you're doing it to race, but sometimes, and this is the case right now, is because we've spent an awful lot of time doing other things, including making those mufflers, the bathroom renovation, moving my son to Manhattan. Well, now it's time like it's a football game, and we're behind the 8 ball. We gotta score a couple of touchdowns. So having this in silver today will be the equivalent of, you know, getting Peyton Manning or something to come over here, or something. I don't know what. I should say Drew Brees, since I'm a new Saints fan, thanks to Ray Dory. We're rooting for the Saints, Ray. Trust me. We're rooting for the big jobs. Now, I want every piece really detailed out the best I can make it. I really don't want to compromise anything on this. I really want this. I know, you know, and there's a logic to, oh, it's only an old-time stunt plane. No, it's not. This is a special plane to me. Oh, it's getting cold out here again. Oh, I say cold, I don't mean 30 degrees either. Hard to even get the paint to flow in this cold weather. And of course, the best thing of all is parts that look reasonably nice. Put the first coat of silver on. Guaranteed you're going to be disappointed. It's a guarantee. Oh, heat wet. And I can just put a nice big thick wet coat on because this is going to get sanded off. This is the equivalent of using filler. Except we're not going to use any filler. The problem is it's so cold out here, it hurts. It just hurts to hold a spray gun. We have Green Bay Packers playing football out here or something. Clean these parts up with M600, of course. It's so cold, the paint is getting cold out here. Oh, God. It's not even funny. And you can always expect that when you get the first coat of silver on anything, it's going to be depressing. But I've got a very happy wife. She loves her granite. What can I say? No matter what, this coat will be sanded off, and that'll be the end of it. I don't know how many years it's been since I used any talc at all, or zinc sterate, or filler, or any of that stuff. I just like doing it this way. It's old school and it's perfect for this type of plane. It usually takes a little longer than you think it should. And it almost always comes out lighter than you think it should. In fact, that's our first coat of silver. Actually, it doesn't even look as bad as I thought it would. That's going to get wet sanded off. It's going to have to dry for at least one day anyway. Oh, I got to get out of here. Cold. If you could only see cold. There's cold in that sky right there. Oh. Well, it's time for Javalia coffee. And you know what else it's time for? Let's see how that silver dried up today. Okay, our silver is dried overnight, and I can get a start looking at what the flaws are going to be. Just a quick look at this. Quick look for dry spots. And we got a dry spot right there. So for the first sand out, we got some grain showing there. I guess there was just a flaw I didn't take care of. On the fuselage part, it looks overall dry up in the front, and I'm going to show real quick how I would go about repairing that. A couple of dry spots over here. Nothing we can't deal with. Nothing terrible. So my plan is going to be, the time we have allocated for this session, I would like to get this first coat of silver sanded out. It's not snowing out there, and it's not any worse than it was the day before. And I want to get the next coat of silver on. That's going to be drying, and in the time it's drying, what I'll try to get is, I can get started on a tail or one of the other little projects, make the rudders or whatever, but as always, the key is to get something drying. And once something is drying for the day, then I know the rest of the day is kind of like we're just cruising. So let me go through this and see if we can pick up and show what the flaws are and how we can correct them on these parts. Now the first test is, because this has been drying overnight, first quick little test is just to see if the dope is dry. And just by running some 320 on a block over this, I can pick up the flaws. And for the first coat, this doesn't look any worse than what I would have expected from any coat of silver. As soon as you put silver on, you know you're going to be have your depression pills handy, because it always shows up a lot of flaws. Second coat will be better, third coat even better than that. Now the first coat, to me, 320 is fine. We don't have to get crazy with trying to make this super smooth yet. Right now, this is really just going to show us where the flaws are. And because it's silver, it's going to show you even way more than if you were to paint this gray. You'll see a tenth of this. And I'm so at this point in time, if I were to wait to the end of the build to start doing the silver, what happens is I come down to the shop, spray a coat of silver, I'm done for the day. And then the time is not really spread out, the finishing time is not spread out efficiently. Also, when there's a lot of this to do in one day, when you have 3-4 hours of sanding, it can take some of the fun away. Where this way, the method I use, you're sanding a little bit every day and building a little bit every day, and I think in the end it just turns out to be more fun. And as I've said, if you're not having fun building, well, there's really not much point in building. Now, just as an example, I'm going to leave a little of the silver on because this next coat will get sanded with 600. Now anyway, there's a dry spot. I know I've got to add material there. Now one of the ways of doing this is before I ever sand it, I'll just go over this really gingerly with the 320, because I know I have a dry spot there. Now before I even do the sand out, there's no point, no matter what I do, in terms of sanding, there's still going to be a dry spot there. I know I've got to kind of seal it up. Now in the past what I've done, I've tried to just put more and more dope on it, and that works. But it takes a lot of time. This way, by doing this, this lets just a little C8, and you can just be real careful when you do this. One tiny drop. Whoop, there we go. Let it sit for a nanosecond and then wipe it off carefully. Now what that does, that seals the dry spot. Whoop, there we go. Now I can sand it as if that spot wasn't there. Back here, there's a spot you can see right along here. Where it's rough, well, here's another trick. And what I want to do is just show some of these tricks, because it always looks so terrible when you do the first sand out. And if it was really deep, we'd get a little tiny amount of that red lead. I don't think this is going to need it. Now I can still feel that, so maybe the best thing is going to be some red lead there. I'll have to look at it. But basically what we need here is to have, since there's a lot of dry spots on this, what we need to do is just sand it down, put another coat of silver on it, and we can just put the silver on indiscriminately, because then the next time we sand this, we're going to sand it with 600. And then that'll get us down to where all of these little flaws hopefully will just disappear. So what's important here, you can look and see there's a little piece up there. Because what I really want to do is show how rough some of these parts look in the very beginning, but it's the silver that lets you see the mistakes. Without the silver, you don't really see these mistakes. And in this case, the little spot right there we want to address, it looks pretty ratty. At this point in time, it looks ratty. Once it's all sanded out, it's going to look a lot less ratty would be the best way to say that. But the way I like to do this is one step at a time, not get too carried away. Just one step at a time. And things look really rough up here. This looks really rough. But I think you can just basically see that needs some work. And we're just going to sit. We're going to take our little tool, grind that area nice and smooth. Some little spots down here need, if you can pick away at it, top block maybe needed. We got some spots here that are going to be inside the canopy area, and I want everything smooth before I go for the canopy area. The dry spot right there may need a little red lead. This spot here you're not going to see, but I want to address it. I want to make that perfectly smooth before I move on. There's a spot right down there. But if you get this idea that you're just going to spend the time, and this is what I'm going to do, and a lot of this we can just do off camera, because this will be a minimum of an hour, maybe an hour and a half of sanding, and I want to get the next coat of silver on, and I can have that on and still have some time left in the day to work on the next part of this project. So this is the time when if I were to start rushing this through, the day will come when I'll be unhappy. And if I take my time now, I'll be happy for a long time to come, the whole service life of the plane. And let's hope that's a long time. A very long time. Now, one of the things, when I get to the end of the sanding, and this took about an hour and a half, I think, an hour. Anyway, there's a couple of spots up here that I'm tempted, probably I should red lead them in now, but I'm going to try not to. Anything I can feel with my finger, I'll give this one more shot, because what I do is I'm trying to avoid using any red lead at all. I really hate red lead, period. It's like just taking baggage along on your square 8. I spent a lot of time around here with a block. Even though you're not going to see this, you're almost guaranteed not going to see this unless I take the plane apart and you want to go inside and look at the belt crank. But this is one of those things where the gods see everywhere. Now it looks like it's a decent enough day for spraying out there, even though it's really cold. Again, a big surprise, it's really cold. Now this will be inside the wing too. I probably won't see it, but the point that I wanted to make is if you detail everything out, if you do a really good quality detailing and you just sit, in my case I'm just going to have an extra cup of coffee, and I don't care how long this takes, because I know that once I get to the end of the silver, then the finish just goes downhill. Then it's just perfect. When you get to the finished part of it and you start pulling up tape and there's a flaw here and a mountaintop here and a jujube there and something else there, or an edge that never got radiused off, boy, that's a killer. Then it takes all the fun out of the finishing part, which, needless to say, is one of my favorite, maybe the favorite part of building it. Now I can always look here, wherever when I've block sanded this and there's silver that just doesn't seem to want to come out, I know that's kind of a low spot. I know I've got a little low spot there, but I'm going to try right to the last minute to fill these with silver dope. There's no filler, no talc, no zinc stearate, none of that stuff going along for the ride here. And again, what you have to keep in mind is this silver magnifies the flaws by so much. It doesn't allow you at this point in the time to feel real good about where this is going. But then once you put the colored paint on, boy, whatever color you pick is going to be easier than silver to hide flaws with. And we're trying to get in every corner, every angle, every edge. Now you can bet not many people are going to see inside the cowling here except me and maybe a few people watching the video, but you know what? I just like having everything, every edge broken. Even areas that you don't see. And a lot of this you don't see at all. And this spot up here, I'm not so sure. This may be a candidate for some red lead there eventually, but I can always give it every chance possible. Now the last thing is, before we get ready to spray, and it's looking like it may be decent, I wanted to show this one little thing that always seems to work. Sometimes I have trouble doing this when I don't have a helper. Because if you look at this, you see all of the low spots go front to back. And what I tried to do is, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this the way I want to. Let's see if I can do it with my... Just a final little detail touch. But we definitely will get the next coat of silver on this today, and then move on with other parts of the project. So, oh, and Karen is so happy with her granite. Oh my God, I can't even tell you. And this will be the inside of the cockpit when we put the canopy on will be, well, at least I hope the grain won't be showing to a certain degree anyway. Anyway, this is always what I try to do just before the next coat of silver, because it tends to pick up all the high spots that you normally don't get any other way. And this is even a good thing to do if you're shaping a top block. Anyway, I think we're going to wipe this down with M600 and we're going to be ready to spray silver momentarily. Now there's one final thing, and I wanted to mention it as I'm looking around here and I'm trying to break all the edges. When I work over that purple towel, or any towel, it picks up all this silver dust that you get on your hands. And it's really not a great thing to be breathing that in. So what I try to do, as soon as I'm done with this part of the project, what I'll kind of do is take that right over to the washing machine, throw it in, put it in on a quick wash cycle, and when I get it back, it'll be nice and clean. And all of that dust, I've even tried vacuuming this gray stuff up. This dust from this, when you're dry sanding it, now from this point on we're going to be wet sanding, so it won't be a problem. But when you're dry sanding it, it's really a problem. And I've always been impressed when I see somebody's plane, they take the cowling off and inside it's relatively nice and smooth. And that's a good reason to do it, but there's an even better reason. Airflow is, if you've ever worked on a flow bench, reworking a car or a motorcycle engine, you know that just smoothing out the ports, and that's exactly what the cooling on a model airplane is, just smoothing them out. Even the slightest bit is a giant upgrade over having them look like the back of a porcupine. Anyway, we're ready to spray. I gotta wipe this with M600 and we're ready to go. I think that really, that area up there, I'm looking because this, I may have to, ultimately pull out the plugs and put a little of that in. This is still rougher than I thought it would be. I don't think you're going to see any of that, but I still wanted it to be nice. But if it doesn't sand out on the next right in here, this I put you can see where the silver stayed in there. What happened is that line is the center, the center line of the wing. And I think what happened is I just pushed the pen in a little bit too deep and clean the edges of that up. And the biggest thing, I always take my bare hand, and just work my hand over it. Feel for some area feels rough, dry. And as soon as I'm done with this, as soon as this part is hanging up by the heating vent, needless to say, the next thing is get that, all of this dust. I don't even want to shake that. I just throw it right in the washing machine. And put Karen's beautiful, delicate whites in with it, just to save water. I don't think so. It goes in with the work cloth. Green Bay Packers. As I come out here, the wind changes. Anyway, this coat will get sanded, so we're not going to worry about it too much. Just put a coat on. It's going to get sanded. Oh, it drops. It does that every time. You think by now I could afford a hook. I could afford a real hook. Anyway. Now that coat will get, ooh, it's cold out here. That coat will get sanded with 600 and possibly be closing in on having a final coat that we're going to be happy with. But this will be drying for the whole rest of the day. That's the good news. This is pretty cool. I can't tell if that's a hawk up in a tree, but there's a big bird up on the tree. I'm always on the lookout for that. That is a hawk. Ooh, uh-oh. Pigeons beware. By the time I'm done painting, there may be a few less pigeons in this area. Now I know it's usually the second or third coat the part starts to look a little bit better, and each time you sand it and go down in the grit of the paper, just just that much nicer. What I'll do is I'll just give this a minute or so and look for dry spots. Wherever I see a dry spot, I'm going to want to go over it a second time. And there are a few dry spots. Right up in that front where we had that dry spot. And it doesn't really matter how much material I put on here because it's going to get sanded off anyway. This definitely will not be the last coat, but as long as each coat just gets a little nicer, we'll be real happy. It's coming. And we got a lot of dry spots on this part, I know that. Well, at least we're going to get this. One thing we're going to get at this is a silver belt frame. Oh yeah, there's dry spots everywhere. This part actually probably could have used a little more clear. Now, if the whole part looks too dry, I'll just wait an hour or so and give it a coat of clear and then put another coat of silver on. But let's see what it looks like when we get to that point. Now, to be honest, this is what's going to happen here. Don't fall down. It looks like this whole part could use a little more clear. So what I'll do is I'll set it up by the heating vent for an hour or so. Let this dry off, especially the top block. That'll take one more coat of spray clear. Let this dry, and then we'll put another coat of silver on it. Now, if you look at this real close, you can see that it's just dry. Dry. Once you can identify these dry spots, especially on the top, you see the stripes. So what we're going to do, of course, it's up by the heating vent, and believe me, the heat never shuts off in this house. So we'll give this an hour or so. In the course of that time, that'll be dry. That always amazes me when you take this out of the dryer. Clean as a whistle. Clean as a whistle. You'd never know we sanded silver. Now, this coat looks like it's, I'm going to guess, it's a wild guess, of course. I'm going to be able to put one more sanding with 600, and that'll probably be ready. So that's one part that we can, not in the bank, but a little bit of a head start on. Look at the cowl. Some of this is going to need one more sand out. Now see, this is a dry spot. There's a couple things. I got different lighting here. Let me change the lighting. If you can see what a dry spot is, and that's the hardest thing in finishing, is to know where the dry spot. Now, if you sprayed the first coat of silver and you had no dry spots, you got too much paint on a plane. What this allows you to do with the silver is to pick away at spots that you know there isn't enough paint. And where there is enough paint, you can just keep sanding until you've got it perfectly smooth. Now, that little dry spot up here, the CA took care of that. This will have to dry overnight, of course. And what I've done is I've given the fuselage a good hour up by the heating vent, maybe a little more than an hour. And what's happening now, I want to go look at it, evaluate it, because I want to put a coat of clear on, and I want that to dry for an hour, and then I want to have another coat of silver. And we're coming up on it. And here's the thing. When you can do your finishing and go from dope to silver, and you know this part of the finish right now up to the last coat of silver, I personally call the substrate. It's not really the substrate, but I call it everything under the colored paint. And since we're going to be doing a custom mixed color, in fact we're going to do on video how we mix our custom colors this time. I've got some custom pigment from Dave Midgley. We're real happy the way it's going to, I think we're going to be able to do a little test, in fact, in the next couple days to see if we like the color, if Karen likes it. But the most important thing that this tells you is when you have the minimum amount of material on, because if you just spray the first coat of silver and it's perfect, again, you probably have 3 or 4 ounces or whatever. You've got too much paint on. This allows you to get that real drawn out, smooth, and you can see it. You don't even have to feel it. I can almost tell when I look at somebody's plane if it's got that thin finish that's stretched out, or if it's just what I call decoupage. Now, if you can see, and I'm sure you can, this whole thing is, I think I just sanded maybe a little bit more in an attempt to get this finish real light. Doesn't matter. See, the nice thing about doing all this silver finishing, it's never like you do something and you're done. There's always a very easy way to take material off or add material until you have that very, very ultra thin. You can see it's pretty well dry. So rather than fool around, this is pretty easy. Right now, I always have a clear gun. It's always full of clear, 60 thinner, 40 clear, and it's always ready to spray for doing touch-ups. I never put anything in the clear gun except clear. And for people that don't know, I try to use the cheapest spray guns possible. I do have some Iwatas, some good ones, but I always have that gun full of clear. Now, the other thing, I know this doesn't sit well with some people. I never ever take the paint out. The paint is in there 24/7, 365. I never take the paint out. There's a gun that only has red in it. There's a gun that only has silver. A gun that only has primer. A gun that only has clear. A gun that only has black. And a gun that has, guess what color that is? Well, and then there's a gun that we vary the color in. And then we have our most reliable gun of all, the one we spray PVA with. Oh, that's not it. Where is it? Oh, here it is. We have a PVA gun. And that's the warhorse of spray guns. Now what I save this gun for, I never put two-part. See, any of these two parts, and I know Bob Brookins would laugh at this, I never put any of the two parts or the PVAs or anything. I keep a PVA gun for PVA, and I keep a gun for all these urethanes that we have in our arsenal of stuff. And while we're painting motorcycles over the winter and doing parts and accessories and stuff, that gun does all of the two-part stuff. And I leave that gun, when I'm done, I just leave it full of acetone. Spray half of it out and leave the other half in it. Anyway, not sure that's good information, but or something you can use right away, but you definitely can use it. Now again, one of the funniest things I have people ask me, they want to know what kind of spray gun I use, and they think I have some $1,000 spray gun or something. I really don't. And I don't like to say that cheap guns are better than expensive ones, but I'd rather have 3 or 4 or 5 $20 spray guns than one real expensive one. I've never found any advantage to having a real expensive spray gun other than the fact that maybe if you're doing airbrushing you can get it down, or for general modeling like we do, or painting motorcycles, these very inexpensive spray guns that they seem, I think almost every one of them, Harbor Freight has them for under $20. They all come from China anyway, whether Whether they go for this label, a big label, or the off-brand, they're all, nothing's made in America anymore. I don't know. I can't help but be annoyed about that, but what can I tell you? Anyway, this is dried up enough. I'm gonna go get that clear gun and get a coat of clear on this. Again, it's got to sit at least an hour. It's got to dry before I put the next coat of silver on. Now, I would be tempted in the past to just run a piece of sandpaper over this, but I learned in the past that doesn't really solve any problem, because where the dry spots are, it's usually the mountaintops. And all you do is expose the mountaintops and defeat the whole purpose of doing it. So at this point it gets sloppy. We get the clear on, but by tonight when this is up there drying, we'll be a little bit ahead of the game, I hope. And what's happened is the wind has changed 180 degrees. Just anything to make it convenient. You just couldn't have a better winter than this. Now this should help seal it up. You'll actually be able to see, even though we're going to do no sanding in between, you'll definitely see when you get the next coat of silver on here. This is going to have to dry, of course. I'm going to give this an hour up by the heating vent. Yeah, usually an hour or so up by that heating vent. We'll be ready for the silver. Now that coat of clear sealed just a little bit, gave it a little bit more shine. I'm not sure we are even going to need 2 more coats of clear. But we'll put 1 more coat of silver on. And that's probably all the material I'd want to put on in one day. As I want it to outgas, I want it to harden. I don't want to get too cute. When you start putting on coat after coat after coat in one day, you can get too cute. Now the point is we can go back and forth and do this over and over and over until it's right. But well, it certainly looks a lot better than it did. And there's still some dry spots up here. There's a spot up on a nose. I'm not so sure I'm going to get away without putting some red light up there. Back by this, there's a little bit of an area I don't like back there. But that coat of clear certainly did help. And we'll see when this dries up tomorrow what it looks like. Always let a coat of silver dry overnight. But from this point on, we're not going to make that awful mess with the sandpaper. What will happen now is, and it's going to be to our advantage, what will happen is now we'll be able to start wet sanding it with 600 from as soon as that dries overnight. But you can see how each step of the way it just gets a little nicer and a little nicer. Each coat just gets a little nicer. And we end this day with the magic. The magic, chopping the ice. It just couldn't be any more fun than this. Oh, it's going to dry up nice. And what could be more fun than knowing that we've got the second coat of silver on there? And the heat never shuts off in this weather. This is very cool. This came in from my Costella today. Ford Tri-Motor doing aerobatics. Now, I'm not so sure I'd be comfortable doing aerobatics, and I'm not even sure this thing is stressed for any aerobatics. I always thought if I ever build a scale model, that's one that would be very cool. And you'd be able to taxi it and loop it and everything. Look at this, unbelievable. You know, I'm not even sure these airframes are stressed for any kind of aerobatics or anything. But I guess there's one way to find out. Anyway, our silver is, thinking of silver, look at it, this tri-motor is all silver. Our silver is drying up. It'll dry up overnight. It'll just be as good as it gets. I'm not sure I'd even want to do this. Anyway, very cool. Very, very cool stuff. Now, I bet you, if this doesn't blow your mind, I mean, Karen and I are renovating a bathroom. We got tiles and grout and crap all over the place. And looking at this beautiful house, actually John Cafaro sent this. Now, how would you, what would you think is the ultimate when you have a beautiful, beautiful home like this? You got to look at this slowly and carefully. I'm not sure. I wouldn't want that, but I'm not sure Karen would be too impressed. Just look at that. Maybe Walbridge will do that to his house. I don't know. That's actually cooler than the Spitfire bedroom I have. By a lot, too. Very, very cool from John Cafaro. Another Mike Costella piece that I think is worth watching. Oh my God. When I think of this, it made me think of John Cafaro when I saw this. Obviously Mercedes-Benz. Now, I wonder, and I'm curious, somebody out there may know, I wonder if they use some computer trickery to do this, or if this really is a real photo or a real video. You know, in this day and age, everything can be photoshopped. There they go with the car and da-da-da-da-da. I'm just a skeptic, but watch this and you decide if you think it is. I tried to play this to see if it was trickery, but I can't really tell anyway. Alright, so they got the road blocked off. This looks like some kind of Super Bowl commercial thing. Nice car anyway, nice color. Hey, you're on your own, Porky. Don't wreck the car. Don't go off a cliff. But I am a German. Look at my eyes. I am so intense. Oh yes, I have my jacket on. I have my helmet. I push the button. $500,000. Oh, we have all the safety crew available in case this doesn't work. Just see if you can tell if this is fake stuff. I bet John Pothier would know. Alright, so he's going 100 miles an hour or whatever he is. Yeah, it all happens so fast you can't really tell. Anyway, it's always cool to see what some people think is a great way to spend $500,000. I don't know if that's how I think I'd buy Karen some more granite. Maybe I'd buy the granite company. I don't know. Very cool though. Look at the wings open up. Very cool. Now, the little bit of time I have left here, and I do have a little bit of time, what I wanted to do, I wanted to make a pattern up of the stabbing elevator. And just mention that even though it shows 200 thousandths on the plans, we're going to make it at 1/4 inch. I'm not sure if that's totally accurate or just a small error, or the real plane really had 200 thousandths. Now, what I have to take into account is the inboard rudder has 1/4 inch of offset, so I've got to really be careful when I make the plan and I make the actual part. I leave it a little bit oversized so I can get that angle in there exactly how I want. Also, I'm not going to use an elevator horn. I'm going to make a piece of my composite material with 64th plywood for the horn. This will save some weight. I don't see any reason that you would need an 1/8 inch horn in a plane this size anyway. The rudders, I think he calls for 1/8 inch. Let me just see, quarter inch offset. So I need to look at this, but if I can just get my pattern made up tonight, that'll be one thing in the bank, so to speak, for tomorrow. And as I speak, that stuff is drying up like jewelry over there. Oh, it's nice. But you know what? When I come back the next day in the morning, I always look at it and I see, oh, there's some flaw. And then I turn into an old washwoman and I want to get rid of the little flaws that are in it. But anyway, this will be relatively easy. If you could get out a piece of paper and make out a pattern here. Now, it would be very convenient. In fact, I made this all one piece for a reason. I wanted to have a center line on it that I could use. Now, the biggest problem I'm going to have is, and I can anticipate this already, this is not going to be a cut and dry thing, because we're totally, there's no way we have sea-grained wood. We're going to have to make a compromised piece of wood here, I can tell. I'll just sketch this in as best I can. And actually what I can do, this piece up here, we're going to have to make little pieces, unless this fits into a 4-inch, and I don't think it does. And that outside is not symmetrical. The outside's going to have a different angle on it, so we got to kind of sketch that in. So by having it this way, once I cut this out, this will be a rough pattern. So what I have is a pattern, a paper pattern that's relatively accurate. And the thing I need to do the same thing, of course, with the elevator. Elevator is a straight piece of wood. It should be no big deal, relatively straight. And I need to take into account that outside angle is going to be, that outside rudder gets cocked off to one side. So while I'm making patterns, I may as well make a pattern up for the rudder too and get all these patterns made up tonight. And I got the pattern made for the elevators, but when I transpose these, once I get the wood that I want to use and I transpose these onto the wood, I want to leave them maybe 1/16 of an inch bigger than they should be, so I can go right over the plans and get it sanded right down. I don't want to take a chance that as I put the hinges in and everything, these things shrink down. They're relatively small to begin with, and I want to keep them as accurate to the plans as possible. Okay, so we have our big job rudders. Now all we need to do is find appropriate wood. That's going to be nice. That'll fit right in there. And I've got to take into account the angle out there. Now what I want to be really sure of, and it sounds like it would be an incremental thing, but it isn't. See these little, I want to make sure I got, this is right on the money. Okay, this is right on the money. Now what's going to happen, these little pieces I'll put on afterwards. I'll add these because I'll never get the grain. When the grain going in that angle, they're going to break instantly, so I can make the change to that. And they're just looking like half-inch radius or something. Now I also want to make sure, it sounds like a small thing, but it's not. I want this to be right on the money. Okay, so we're right on the money with that. We got the rudder piece. Now the next part will be to see if we can get some reasonable wood. We're certainly not going to have the best, as you can imagine. We really haven't gotten any good wood in such a long time. I don't even think about it anymore. But anyway, I got my patterns made now, and as this day is coming to an end very quickly, if I can trace these out and get these all ready to start working on, I'll be a little bit ahead for tomorrow. I want to allow a little bit extra on that side. I'll leave the line on would be the best way to do this. What I want to have is so I'm going to put that little piece in on myself. Now, if I make the end, I'll be able to get that piece on there. Make that a little oversized so I can trim it down. Actually, now I'll just transpose this. But actually, this is not the worst piece of wood. I had, let's see, 7 or 6 or some, but this is by far the only one that's... Now, I've got to leave this. I want to cut them both oversized and then go right over the plans. So I could leave the line on would probably be the easiest way. The one that goes on the inside of the circle is 90 degrees to the hinge line, so let's just transpose that up. Make sure we leave the line on. And we know that's accurate. So what I should have done is gone to Staples and made an extra set of prints and played paper dollies, but that's okay. We're done with that now. Now we need to see if we're going to be able to get the elevators out of this piece. Nah, not a chance on earth. So that means we're going to have to chop up another piece of wood. And we had choice 2 here. This one's not bad. See the problem with this really light wood? It's light. It's just twisted. And I know that's going to come to haunt me in the final plane. I don't want to deal with that. So even though that piece is a little lighter, we'll just skip over that and go with C grain now. It's semi-C grain, so I'm looking for the part of it that's this right up here, that it's the most C grain. Again, I'll make these a tad oversized so I can go right over the plans later and that can get trimmed down. Let's see. Should I put the grain out? This is the best grain right here. So here's the center. Here's the tip. Here's the tip. And we need to make it just a tad oversize so that we can get it to run right up against. Let's see. Thinking out loud. Thinking. Actually, this is all going to happen. If I get these parts prepped up for tomorrow, I'm going to definitely be able to finish the tail and get that into silver, started into silver. Oh, let's just make sure before we cut. Measure twice, cut once. That's a little oversized. That's the side that's going to have to get cut. Okay, so we can run over to the jigsaw and just cut these out. It's a big job. Now I've got the piece right over the plan, and I want to get that angle on there. And I can trace this, which means we're going to be right on that angle. I'm assuming Charlie has drawn this in. This is now going to be the outer tip. And this side we need to get 90 degrees. So I can use the triangle and just go up. You know, I need to trim, and this now becomes always the outer edge. I can't flip it. So this will always be the top side. Won't really matter. Just for now, I need to know, and I need to trim that off. Now the next thing is to true these edges up. We're definitely going to get this prepped up tonight, which would be really nice. I know this is the inner side. We are exactly to the plans. It couldn't be any more accurate than that. We found something that's pretty close to the radius that we want. And if we use the same tool, you would think there's a good chance maybe they'll be the same. And those little pieces that go up on the fuselage, I'm going to put them on after we get this all assembled. I just think that'll be a more accurate way of doing it. That's a nice, that transition has to be real accurate. I'll sleep good tonight knowing tomorrow I got a nice big jump on this. Now the last thing I want to do here, just center line everything. And the main reason I want to be sure to do this, I want to make sure this piece doesn't warp when I dope it. Okay, everything's pretty much ready to go here. That's one piece out of one down. Do the same thing to the elevators. And that's pretty accurate. I think that's that's definitely pretty accurate. And we've got the angle just what the plans show. Okay. That piece is ready for tomorrow. Now, using the same technique, I'll use the T-square and get that edge. So now I have a dedicated edge for each side. This side is fine. This side I can just trace that right down. And that should be another piece ready. Now that's probably as good as it gets. I'm ready to center line that, and we are prepped up for tomorrow. Now the thing here is, because of that angle on the one side, we have dedicated sides. So we must obviously maintain that. Oh, that is nice. Charlie, I hope you're impressed. You better be impressed. All right, here we go. We got just enough clearance on both sides. Yes, yes. Well, we're prepped up. We're ready to go. In fact, what I'm going to do is look for a piece of, these are supposed to be eighth inch. I'll look for a piece of 1/8 inch, get these cut out, and I will consider this a heck of a day. I always keep reminding myself, once it starts looking like an airplane, it's a whole lot more fun than working on parts. And, as if that wasn't good enough, our silver's drying up by the heating vent. So, as I always say, if something's drying, I'm working on something else, there's never any wasted time here. No wasted motion, no wasted time. Well, we were supposed to get some big snow. It looks like all we got is little snow, but I'm glad we got that painting done yesterday. That can sit up and dry for today. It's a winter wonderland, but what are you going to do? We try to squeeze in all this spray in while we can without having to walk around in the ice. It always looks so nice right after it snows. Notice I filled the feeder, guys, so hey. Now with all the snow out there, it just means this will be a good workshop day. Now one of the details that's unique to the big job is this little radius. And you can see what I've done because this stab comes off. I have a very similar radius. See how it comes to a point? Kind of unique to this ship. But on the big job, it doesn't come apart. That's all going to get glued together. So I have to account for that. And I have to make a little bit of an adjustment to the way I'm going to make the plane. I'll explain why. Now, one of the things that's unique to this design, again, it's a small detail, but we don't want to compromise it or not do it correctly. These little radiuses. Now, I would personally guarantee if I cut that out of this with the grain going this way, that you'll never get it to a point. Impossible. That's something I've learned the hard way over the years. What I have learned, though, is if I put the grain almost diagonal, I need to make a separate piece, and of course we have scrap. First thing is, I need to get this inserted in, and I need to get some kind of a relative alignment on it. And I guess what I'll do is I'll put this right on top of this. It's not a good way to do it. I need a better way to do it. And what I need to do is, I guess I don't need to get it within thousandths here. There's the center. Okay, that gets me relatively close. Now what I can do, I can mark this angle out. And again, because we have a top and a bottom, we have one side here. We can't flip it back and forth. That's going to be that. As I flip it over, I haven't lined anything up yet. See, normally, if we didn't have that little radius in there, what I do is I jump right in, put this onto the back of the fuselage and do a real accurate alignment. Get this lined up to the leading edge of the wing because the trailing edge is tapered. But I can't really do that now. And I don't, here's the other thing, and as I did this last night, I was building this in my mind, I realized there's another time bomb here. My original thought was I was really going to cheat the system. I said, you know what I do is I just make this piece solid. Now the problem is that cuts into the integrity of the fuselage, and I'm not sure that would have been a deal breaker because this fuselage is really thin in the back, and it's not, in no way, and Keith has reminded me in emails, this is not a real strong fuselage in the back. So the compromise that I'm going to make here is I'm going to try to just hold this piece in position. In fact, maybe I can do it this way. No. I'm just going to cut these parts out and tack them in place. Because what I want to do is I want to shape this point. I want this to be a very attractive part of the model. And I want to do this shaping too, but I want those pieces in place. And then once I glue this on, I can build that little glue fillet in there. But the other problem with this is, and you can imagine in the Wild Hogs group of launchers, somebody is going to launch the model this way. And they're going to just, if that isn't hardened with CA and like solid as a rock, I'm going to have a very unattractive little dent in the plane there. So I've got to do this the long, slow way to grandma's. I'm going to make these pieces up from scrap. I'll make them oversized. Anytime you're making a part that you're going to radius, make it a 1/16 of an inch oversize. Then I'll glue it on here, but the grain will be going almost parallel to the fuselage, maybe off a 10-degree angle. And then I can get this fit in here, because this fit is going to be on an angle this way too. This is not a straight, it's more complicated than you think to get this right. I have to take into account this little radius here so that that part just goes right up there, or else I'm going to lose the integrity of this little part of the design. Now when I'm doing these radiuses, the idea is to make, even though this is a piece of scrap and it's a decent piece of wood, one side is way harder than the other. So I'm going to use the hard side because it's going to maintain that, what I hope is going to be a, well, I want to be on about on that angle. This is really not scientific, and I always have to do it oversize. I'm just doing parallel lines here. And then once I cut this, I can put that little radius in with a Dremel tool. So the first thing I need to do, of course, I cut the piece way oversized. I want to get the angle right. Now it's that angle there, because I want to make a pattern up here. Okay, now I can take this over and with a Dremel tool radius this off. Now, but the main thing of this is the grain is going in the direction we want to go in, which is going to really stack the deck in our favor. Now I'm pretty close to the plans, maybe oversized by a 64th here. In fact, I got it backwards. Okay, now I need to get the angle. See, this fuselage has a little bit of an angle to it, a little bit of a curve. So I need to get that curve put in there. And every time I do this, I want to wind up with, I want to just go a little test fit here. It's not much of an angle, but it's enough that if I don't take that into account, now I don't have the, I've got a little gap in there. Now, each time I do this, I'll come up with a very accurate pattern at the end, and then I'll cut two pieces. This is really just a pattern. And that's why I make it oversized, because you've got to go back and forth several times before you get the exact. All right, we're pretty close now. And just a little bit oversized, which is exactly what I want, because what I want to have happen here, I'm going to glue this piece to this, and then I want to take the fuselage away and do this leading edge shaping, which will be a critical part. It'll be one of the defining parts of the model. And then I can lay the stab right over the plans and get this radius exact, but I'll have this fit, I'll have the little bit of an angle, and it'll be very, very close, but most of all the grain will be going in the proper direction to give us the best chance possible that we don't get a big ding in a model from somebody launching it like it's a pickle fork. Now I can make the other side, and I want to get the grain oriented exactly the same way. In fact, I can do it this way, it'll be easier. And I've got to account for that little angle. But I'll be able to take the stab right off and go right over to the plans to make sure I have the top view exactly right. And this will let it butt right up against the fuselage. Okay, we got our two pieces here. Now the next thing is just to tack them in position so we know we have this accurate. This is a part of it it's got to be pretty accurate. I just let some pins hold this in place while I do the final fit. And I've been working this with a little sanding block. I want to get as nice a fit as possible there. I want that to be lined up also. Oops, it's not. There we go. Now in the high-risk world of modeling, we'll just put one tiny tiny drop there, just to hold that until we can make sure it's right. Don't want to glue it to the fuselage. Actually, I should put some Teflon in there, but then I'd have to. It's getting too complicated here. That's now it's perfectly level this way. Okay, that's all I need to just hold that in. Now I got to get the other side in. I'm going to get one side here sanded. Let's see if I can do it this way. Would be a lot easier. Yes, I can. And there's no substitute for just paying the price right now and getting the fits right. Because once we pull this apart and carve it and harden it and tissue it, it really will be difficult going back. And I remember how much time I spent with Tribute getting this little piece to fit right. Yeah, and it's really one of the things only the most dedicated modeler, connoisseur, would even notice it, but I know the friends I have would notice it. And especially when you build something on video and it's not perfect, people know about it. You get to see it a lot closer than somebody's model who you just get to a meet and all of a sudden it's there. Okay, that looks like we're ready, we're good to go. Now we can pull this apart and then put a permanent glue joint on that. Now I can find something that's close to the radius that's on the plans, and I can sand this last little bit, because otherwise I'd never be able to get that. And it also ensures that both of these will be the same radius. Boy, there's just so many little tricks here, it's hard to believe, huh? And I'm always shocked. I guess surprised, shocked is not the right word. When somebody will say something like, nobody will ever see that. Why even bother buffing that out? Why bother sanding that? I don't know, it just not the way I would like to do things. Now that's going to be a hard thing to get. We'll probably spend more time getting these to come to a perfect point. We've got the angles right. But trust me on something, if you didn't do it this way and you left this square and glued this to the fuselage and then try to sand this to shape, you're in for a world of extra work. This is the only way I know of that, and I hope you could steal this idea from me. Now, next thing, of course, is to get a good center line on this, because we're going to carry that line right out. So we have both of these. Now, the most important thing now, it seems silly, but it's not, is I want to harden up the edge that's going to go into the fuselage. Because what's going to happen, these parts are really going to be vulnerable while we're tissuing and wet sanding and whatever. And I don't want to have these I just don't want it to have that little ding or something, and it used to make me crazy when I bring a new model out in the spring and somebody says, "Oh, I'll launch your plane." Yeah, you look at them, they got 12 watches on and gold jewelry and everything, and right into the plane like Godzilla. I want to take each one of these and maintain that flat. So when I start shaping that, I'm starting from a flat, not from a crooked angle. And if you go back long enough to see doing this on Tribute subscriber videos, you know it took me a lot of hours to get that little angle point just right. But it's such a nice little detail when it's done. Now for right now I can leave these, I just want to get them roughed in. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is, because this is going to slide into the fuselage and I know this is an accurate datum line, I want to put masking tape over this so there's no way I distort this shape. This center shape this is going to slide right in like a datum line. I don't want to distort that shape, and that's always a good way to do it on a flat tail. The part of the flat tail that you don't see, just cover it with tape so you don't make the sheeting real thin either if you're doing a sheeting tail. Now, believe it or not, this piece of wood stayed really nice and straight. So lucky me. Now, the only purpose of the tape is I don't want to create an airfoil layer or anything while I'm doing the shaping of the stab. In the shaping of the stab, what I want to do is I want to do it off the model. I don't want to have this glued to the fuselage piece and be working on this. So now what this is going to allow me to do is start shaping the leading edge. I'll start with the leading edge, but at no point in time do I sand underneath this tape. That keeps the middle of it nice and solid. Now this kind of shaping, it's easiest to start with one of the radiuses. If you start with this, it's hard to get a knife to go in here and then it chunks out. So I found that by trying to do this, the easiest way is just and that's why I hardened up the back of that wood, so I wouldn't have that to deal with, that this would come chunking off and I'd have to make another part. And I want to see the line at all times. I don't want the line to disappear. And I can just walk out on the edge just a little bit. That same thing out here, this is a little bit easier to do because it's a bigger radius. Now once I have that started, the rest is pretty redundant to do all the other sides and edges. The center is still square, so I'm going to finalize all these radiuses and then start working that leading edge. But the tape reminds me, don't thin out the middle and don't put any kind of a shape in it that isn't flat. Now with those parts roughed in, the next step, get some of this material off. But it's just very difficult to carve this kind of a radius. It seems, or at least to me anyway. And in this one, because we have a glue joint, it's just way easier to just use a Dremel. And as I'm going along, this is going to be time consuming. This will probably take, well, we don't really care what it takes. But I want to get this detailed out as much as possible. And get all those radiuses to blend real nice. And I have all different sanding radiuses for all of these radiuses. Something that, this is actually a Gorham's jar. Now once this is roughed out, the thing that's difficult is to get a smooth transition, and I need, this one matches this radius pretty well. And I want to make sure I don't taper one way more than the other, of course. And when I'm all done, I want to harden that leading edge up with some thin CA. So this is going to be a little bit more involved than just doing a straight tail. And by the way, for my own technology testing, whatever you want to call it, I've made a lot of planes with 1/4 inch sheet tails, the Spitfire for one, the Tribute, and up to a 24-inch span, a 1/4 inch tail, a 1/4 inch piece of sea grain is just fine. And boy, it saves you a lot of time building up with all the lollipop sticks and toothpicks, and I have not found any reason not to use that so far anyway. Now, once I get to this point and I get this started, this is gonna obviously take some time. And what I need to do is get the smaller radius. I'm not sure if this is going to be the one I want. Now see how I want to work right up to that line. And as soon as I get even close to the shape I want, then I'll harden it with CA every time I sand it. This is just going to take a little time to get the shaping that I want, and to get this that I can't feel that transition. You can see how one side is way higher than the other. Well, that's where having these rolls and sanding tools and all this little stuff, it really comes in handy. Especially when you want to detail things out, which is exactly what we want to do right now. And anytime I see I'm not quite up to the line, I can just go back. Now the other thing too is I'm putting just a little bit of taper in here. It's not tapered in this part very much, but at the tip, these two tips get tapered right down to a point. Now the next, you can see all the sanding scratches there. The next thing is to just detail this whole thing out. And we've got the taper in the tip that we want, where those details come right to a point. We want to work them. As soon as we get the shape we want, I don't want to do anything to that middle of the fuselage, because if you put this taper in and then you glue it in the fuselage, it could be just a little bit. Want to stack the deck in our favor that we don't have that issue to deal with. I'm going to get all the sanding scratches out of this. Now I had thought the right way to do this, and it's a little more work, but you get some integrity out of it. The right way to do this is, once we have the stab and elevators hinged and they're all set to go and the rudders are not glued on, I can tissue this and bring it up to silver before I put the rudders on or glue this in place. And what that buys me is it'll just be a lot easier doing the tissue and the sand out. And then when I'm all done with the silver, the last little thing will be just putting in that last couple little seams around the rudder and around where this is going to go. But all of this work will be done without having that tail section in place. So what I'm really looking for, and also I would get the most important thing, the tissue will go right across, making this even stronger than it is. And these actually do stiffen it up to a point anyway. But this just takes time, and this is the kind of thing I like to sit by the sanding bench or out on the work table and just, this is going to be one of the defining little features, and I don't want to skip over it or shortchange it or anything. But the biggest thing is, as soon as we get the shape that we're looking for, is to get that whole edge hardened up with thin CA. Now once I get this, and this is the only way I know of, realistic way that you can get parts thin edged and have very defined features, is by hardening up the edges with thin CA. Now I try to do one little spot at a time, of course. But what that does, that turns it into much harder material that's able to hold an edge, the same way steel is able to hold an edge a lot stronger than balsa would. If we were carving this out of hardwood or something, it would be a whole different ballgame. And if you remember on the Tribute plane, we put steel pins in the points, so we would you would be able to file right down and get a point. Now I don't want to have any compromise here, because these things are going to take a beating. Realistically, it's no point making a really nice plane if you know a year later it's going to be all full of bullet holes. Now all these curved sides, exactly the same thing. And I don't care about the final shape now. What I want it to be is hard. I want that edge to be hardened up. And what this is going to allow me to do, and I'll do this several times, it'll probably take 3, 4, 5 coats, each one sanded. But in the end, I'll have the equivalent of having some very hard material right out on the edge where I want to have it. And once these edges are all hardened up, it just makes, if you can see where the CA is, it just makes getting those points and razor edges just a little bit easier. And I even try to harden up the edge here so that when we glue that to the rudder, or the rudders, we have a nice solid straight edge to work off. But the hardest one to get is right in here. Now I took that tape off, and I'm being real careful not to sand more than that than I have to, but I want to get this to blend real nice. I don't want to be able to see that joint in the final product if possible. Now usually in balsa wood it's almost impossible to get a transition between a glue seam and two grains of wood going in opposite direction. But if you harden up the whole area, it makes it a whole lot easier. It actually makes it possible, not only easier. But we'll go back over this 3, 4, 5 times. It won't matter how many times, because that edge, and you can see how that edge is going to be like a razor blade when we're done. It also gives it a little less aerodynamic drag, which is a plus factor, especially in thin air, or may allow us to use a little bit smaller prop or deal with lower air densities. Anything we can do to make an airframe efficient, it's going to work to our favor. You can see I even broke the little end off, but just because it's hardened, I can just run that chunk right back in there. Now, I like to do this with my hand, and my hand really is, I don't know why, it's probably a little better than average after years of doing this, of just finding little high spots or spots that don't feel exactly right. But once I'm happy with them, and it's a feel thing. Here's another spot here, as I see it. Yeah, I thought I was in such good shape. But once I'm happy with this hole and I'm getting close with this edge, in fact, this took a lot longer than I thought it would, but you know, this is one of those things, it's like, well, we want to have what we want to have. Now that I've got 4 or 5 coats of thin CA on there, and you can actually see the wood is hardened up, I can take slow CA, thick CA, and I just want to work this edge maybe another 3, 4, 5 times. Now I just go right. I don't want that. I don't want the towel to stop, because it'll stick, and then I'll have to sand off a paper towel. But I have to just show one, and I'll do the other 3 off camera. And sometimes it takes 4, 5, 6 coats to get that hardened up, but boy, when it's hard. And it's so much easier to keep that edge, especially after it's tissued. And we're going to tissue this before we actually put this in place. For the obvious reason, here we go, it's getting ready to go, there it is right now. Now we're sanding a relatively hard material. And once this is doped and tissued, it should be even better. And what happens with a hard material, it'll hold the edge now, instead of being like what we had with the balsa wood, where you just touch it. And or we have one of the wild hogs have a bad morning, he didn't have his coffee or something, and there's the end of the leading edge. So the extremely lovely Mrs. Artnowski made me this beautiful, is it going to be a Valentine card or not?
No, I think I'm going to frame it.
Very nice. Does it say, honey, I love you inside?
Can you see it?
Yeah, there it is. Honey, I love you in invisible ink. Anyway, I'm hardening up the edges here. I'm working on this furiously because one of our other projects that we have to do today, we have to go down and pick out our vanity. And Karen has found the vanity online, and we're going to run over and see if it meets our needs. So I guess we'll work on the rest of this. All those other edges have to be hardened up. I'll work on that when we get back. What do you think we'd be gone, an hour?
Yes. Okay.
Now we'll get back to working on this in an hour. Now when I get back from getting this vanity, Karen's real happy with that too. Now that I have the edges all nice and hard here and everything's nice and smooth as I can imagine now, edges I guess should be trued up. What I wanted to do is work on tapering the elevators. As per the plans, it looks like if I just go right off the plans, they taper to about 1/8 of an inch. But that's one part that's in the bag. That's kind of a neat looking part too. And it's an exact fit over the plans. Charlie will be impressed. What am I talking about? I'll be impressed. So the first thing is we cut this out the other night. I got a center line on it. We're not going to use a horn. I'm going to make a composite horn out of 64th plywood. I want to put a center line on this as the first thing. And I want to use the traditional method we always use to put a typical stunt ship hinge line, which I do for, there's no difference which model we're building. They're always the same. And especially if it's a 1/4 inch, it makes it real easy. If you go back 1/8 of an inch, it's just about as easy as it gets. And what I do, I put one piece of tape down, 1/8 inch tape. I trued up the edge so it's straight as can be. Yeah, I didn't see any reason to put a horn in here. Just adding weight. And boy, with this long tail moment arm, that gets me nervous. Every time I look at how long the tail is relative to the nose, I don't know. See, I don't know what a Fox 59 weighs. I would ask Charlie, because maybe it's a real heavy engine or something like, so it wouldn't even matter. But our engine, the Jetfire, is a very light engine. Now, I've got the 2 pieces of tape on there. Now I could take the first one off. And this will be just about as easy as it gets. I could do about half of it with a blade if possible. It won't be long now and the whole plane will be in silver, and I'm already thinking about mixing up that custom paint that Midgley sent. He sent down some custom toner. We're going to make our own custom color, so this, when you set the big job out in the field of other planes, it won't be exactly like this guy's or that guy's. It'll be kind of a one-of-a-kind thing. Now I have my, like I said, I lost it. Oh, here it is. Ugh. And what I want to do is I just want to work down to that edge as much as I can. Usually only takes 5 minutes or so to do this. And then we'll be ready to taper it. Put the hinge pockets in. Now usually I can feel when I get a tape. I can just feel it, and then I know as long as I haven't removed the line, I should be good to go. And guess what? More snow is coming in the next couple of days. Another storm is coming. You can see how nice that stayed. That stayed pretty nice. I have to admit that did stay pretty nice. Because we don't have any flaps, we really don't have any alignment issues. The only alignment issue will be to try to get the belt crank in neutral when the elevators are in neutral and get about 45 degrees of travel. Okay, so that now comprises 1/2 of, and now I just have to take this piece off, repeat the same process on the other side, and we're good to go. It's getting exciting working on this every day now. I kind of think about it while I'm sleeping. Okay, so we got our taper on. Now it's just a question of we want to lay out. Okay, so the next step is to lay out the hinge pockets. It's always a good idea to get one hinge right up on the edge, right out at the tip if possible. We also would probably, and I just eyeball this, it'd be fine. I'm going to have a horn in the middle, so I want to have at least, let's see, how should we do this? Well, we'll put one on each side of where that should be. We're going to modify the hinges anyway in the final analysis, and then we can, let's see how that looks. That's probably going to be okay. Or if we wanted to, we can just space them. A lot of times doing this cosmetically is a little bit nicer, add a little nice look to it if they're equally spaced. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. Now that I'm happy with the spacing of the 6 hinges, I have the tool that we always use, and we've used this before on what? Take apart pockets. What that means is they're shallow pockets, which would be fine for this size hinges. Now we always highly modify the hinges. I never use stock hinges, so this will be no exception. Just before I cut the hinge pockets, we'll modify the hinges, and that's probably all we're going to get to do today. Even though we had to split our session up, we do have our vanity. And most of all, we have a happy wife. She's got granite, she's got a vanity, she's got tile, she's got grout. I always like to get a hinge right on the very end, way down at the end. Now, before I go any further with this, I want to continue that center line. That's going to be where we cut our hinge pockets from, but first we have to modify the hinges. So in a matter of a minute and a half, we've got hinge pockets. Now these are the stock hinges that we've been using. We got a few of these left. Not enough to do a big stunt chip, so I'm using them up on this. Now what I do is step one, I grind off the pins. I don't need the pins sticking out, because once this is confined inside a hinge pocket, it can't really go anywhere. So I can grind that right off. And the grinding itself leaves a little lip on each end, but I don't have this big ugly tang hanging off of there. So that's step one. so hot I could burn myself. You would think after 50 years he'd know it's hot. Okay, we get rid of that tang. And what that does, that gives us a nice edge that when you're wiping a model off, it doesn't tend to catch paper towels, or when you're buffing it, or anything. Actually, anything. Now, the other thing about hinges, they're usually way too long. And this one is a clicker. Now, to get rid of a clicker, I take some sandpaper. It just gets rid of any of the clicking. Noel Drindak, not a while, a long time back in Stunt News, had a great thing about hinges and how to free them up. And one thing I absolutely emphasize is that if these hinges are at least a little bit stiff, you're in big trouble. Now I also take a common ordinary scissor here, do this, and from where the holes are back, just cut them right off. Otherwise, what happens, that whole thing gets in there and it puckers the wood up, and we're gonna have a taped hinge line anyway, but now that they're smooth on both sides, I want to make it the equivalent of a washboard. Or in a worst of all worlds, roughing it up with sandpaper. So that when we put the epoxy on there, it's going to tend to get a little bit better grip. Plus, we've gotten rid of some of the weight. Not that it would be a big deal, but it is a big deal on a long tail moment arm plane. So what you have is a standard hinge and one of these modified hinges that's a little bit lighter, a little bit freer in action. I'll do the rest of these off camera, and we're ready to go. Well, that's really all we're going to get done today, but I think we're really moving the football along here. Now, I still have to tomorrow carve this up to match the plan. I got to cut the hinge pockets. I made myself a list of what still has to be done. Then I want to start putting the finish on this, because I can finish the tail section and this at the same time and join them together when they're in silver. And believe me, and I got to do the rudders yet too. So we're closing in on it. It's coming. But so is a snowstorm in the next couple of days. So now today's primary job, we're going to get started on this right now. In fact, I want to get the elevators. I have the center line. I want to put a piece of 1/8 inch tape down the center line, and I want to block sand and carve this down until it meets pretty much the shape that are on the plans. Now this is the shape Charlie shows. Charlie's stab is 200 thousandths, and so what I did with my stab, I just sanded the hell out of it and tapered it. And I'll do the same thing to the elevators. Elevators this wide, first off, they definitely don't need a horn like that adds 10 to 12 grams. And they definitely, there's going to be no flexing. These are very short elevators, so we could take advantage of that and just get a nice taper in them, and that'll give us a little bit of a flat spot around neutral without having to put slop in the controls. And I always found an easy way to do this is just by putting the 1/8 inch tape down the back, same as we sand down to the front. This way always seems to work pretty well. Okay, and as you can imagine, I'm relatively excited this morning for a lot of reasons. Number one, we got our vanity. Number two, it's actually up over 20 degrees, and I didn't have more than about a 5-minute ice chop this morning. And the big one, we're coming up on the end of the woodwork, and we still have to make the wheel pants. But once the woodwork ends, that's kind of like in the way I look at it, a mountain. The woodwork, the finish. And since we have a lot of the silver done already, it pretty much stacks the deck in our favor here, and would be nice if we had a little bit of a cushion in terms of getting this model ready for VSC. I thought I'd mention one other thing. I know an awful lot of people, including Kent, have a shop now that's not based inside the house, and ours, of course, being in the cellar where we have 2 heating vents that every once in a while throw some heat our way. In this extreme cold weather, I've been using this quartz heater, and I just leave it. You can see where I'm sitting. I use it right there. It keeps me warm even when the temperature in here is like under 60 degrees. And it's really, without that quartz heater, I don't know that a lot of days of the year you couldn't work down here, even with the heat on. And these are cheap. They're like $25 or something. This one's lasted about 10 years. And also, as a benefit, I use it in a garage too when I'm working on a motorcycle. I just put it right up where I'm working. Now, it's funny that because of this extremely cold winter, we have been pretty creative, and actually, in a way, we've been pretty lucky about getting some of our paint work done on days that the wind isn't howling and it isn't completely horrible out there. Well, but what's going to happen, we're very soon going to come up on, in a week or so, we're going to be painting every day and be doing paint and tape and whatever. And so we're just hitting this at exactly the wrong time of the year. We're hitting it at a time when, because we have to get this ship ready, otherwise I would kind of be backing off, and I just want to get, well, when you're getting a plane ready for Brodax, it's a whole different thing, because then you get to paint in the little bit warmer part of the year. What I'm doing, I'm just taking some of this. I'll do the rest with the sanding block because I do want to get that taper, but I'm working right up to that tape. I do one side at a time, as always. But it gets exciting. I get excited anyway when I get down to the very end of a project, even a project like making those mufflers for the R1. Any project, a house renovation project, doing anything. When you get down to the very end, I call it putting the switch plates on. When we used to renovate houses with John DeTavio, and you do all this spackle sheet work, put the sheet work up to sheetrock and insulation, everything, and at the very end, after the paint was dry, the flooring was in, the last thing you'd put the switch plates on and then look out into the room and it'd be, ah, beautiful. Well, the big job is getting that way very soon. Now what's really helpful here, I got the old Bernie Trent block with 40 grit paper. Now that I've got the biggest part, I can work all of those knife marks out of it. As soon as I feel a sandpaper, I know I've gone as far as I can go. It goes relatively quickly. These sanding scratches will come out with 220 or 320. I've got to cut the hinge pockets in here yet. Now what I can actually see here, if you look real close, I'm up, the one side of it is completely removed. Now I just need to duplicate the same thing on the other side, and we'll be ready to cut hinge pockets. Okay, now the next step is to pull this off, get rid of the tape. Make sure I've got it right down the center line, which looks pretty decent. I want to radius this edge off. I've gone up to Charlie's plans and seen that I've pretty much got, I want to radius this off as per the plans. I don't want a square edge on this. It's just going to cause aerodynamic turbulence. And the reality is, the sharper you can make the trailing edge, I think, and it's my personal opinion, you've gained aerodynamically, and you've gained having that soft spot around neutral because you don't have that as much turbulence around the trailing edge. Probably a lot of valid counterpoints to that, but that's my opinion. And I've always tried to make the trailing edge of flaps and elevators as razor sharp as I can. Now, even on a Spitfire, I went to great lengths to make this a razor blade. And I'm not sure, again, I'm certainly not an aerodynamic engineer, but you know what? There's a lot of aerodynamic engineers who have not built as many stunt ships as I have. And I really think there's an advantage to that. If there's no question in my mind there's an advantage aerodynamically, but to get that soft spot around neutral, especially the trailing edge. And it's the same thing on Tribute. It has that same razor edge along the whole length of the stab, and especially the trailing edge, a complete razor blade. And Joe Adamusco always, whenever he's at the shop, oh, you and those razor blades, oh, how'd you do that? And in case somebody hasn't seen this Tribute, we have a where the points are on a wing, that's a piece of music wire right in there. So even if you were to go like that, see, and if that's balsa wood, it'll squash. Where we have, I wanted this plane, the defining feature of this plane to be that it was like a porcupine, like razor blades. Well, to me, I was real happy with, and this is really a good flying plane. So the 1/4-inch tail, the razor blades, the plane has done nothing to dispel that myth for me. And in the season coming up, any flights we get on it, this was a new plane when we flew it at the Nats last year in Brodax. We really didn't have enough trim flights on it, but I think this season coming up, hopefully the weather will be warmer and we will get some flights. Now we really got a really good, boy, it's right on the money. That's amazing. That is definitely good. Well, let's make sure we haven't in any way altered any of this. Nope. Now that razor edge, I want to preserve that, and I'm going to do the same thing I did on the leading edge of the wing. Run thin CA down 2 or 3 coats, both sides. Then hit it with a couple coats of thick CA, so what I'll eventually have here is a really, really hard edge of CA, and then I'll resand it and blend it right back in. Now once that CA kicks, and it usually takes 2 or 3 coats of thin CA, 2 or 3 coats of thick CA to bring that edge up. But once that's brought up and once it's tissued, boy, you are absolutely good to go. Also, it protects from, ancillary damage from people picking up the plane, wiping it off, bumping into things. You can see what that taper really came out nice on that part. Now, about the only way I've ever gotten in real trouble doing this is I've used an old paper towel that had those hard spots of CA on it. Once these are little final touches. I'm not sure everybody enjoys doing this. I do, though. That's, and all modeling is in the eye of the beholder anyway. What's valuable, what's worth it, what isn't. And as long as you're doing what makes you happy. But if you want to have razor edges, this is the only way I've ever found to do it without making anything heavier or harder. I've even tried in the past insetting little pieces of wire and hardwood. This works way better. You can get a blend. I had spruce, 1/8-inch spruce and a trailing edge. No good. This is, for me, this way worked better. And I hope that by passing it on, you'll enjoy some of this ability to make razor edges. Well, this worked out just great. That taper is just exactly what I wanted it to be relative to the plans. Charlie, I hope you're impressed. That's all I can say. Now, unfortunately, we're coming up on the end of this video. and I didn't want to start something and being in the middle of it when we do it. We got a lot of steps, and what I do, I have my list, and as we come down the home stretch, I just check off things on my list. Now, I've found this to be super, super helpful. And I don't know how many other people can benefit by this. I've had this on video for years. When I get toward the end of a build, well, actually in the middle of a build, I always try to lay out my next day's work, because in the morning I'll have my coffee, I'll look at the list, and I'll say, dun, 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 dun. Well, I could do that first, and I could have that dope dry in. I could drill that hole, and I could have that, or I have to order these parts from Brodak or whatever. So by having this list, and what I'm going to be doing now, and we're coming down a home stretch, the elevators are tapered, and we're too close to the end of this video to put the hinge slots in. I want to make and install a horn, clear and tissue the parts. The rudders are the last thing, because I can glue those on at the last minute. I want to sand and tissue the rudders. The reason being, I think I'll get a better chance that they're not going to warp one way or another. And I thought by bringing these parts up into clear, it would definitely be an advantage. Oh, we're going to see. And then, of course, the final finish to silver, and then lay out our paint job. Mix our custom paint and lay out our paint job. And for some reason, when I get to the end of any build or near the end, I always try to look back into the 60s and think to myself, boy, could I ever have known where this whole model aviation thing was leading me. It's been an unbelievable project, and I've had so many good friends along the way, and I hope you're enjoying it, being part of the action, maybe possibly learning a little bit from it, and being able to share it with other people. And please, that's why I always say pass the DVDs around. And whether you're building a Strega ARF or you're building a full competition stunt ship or whatever, share the information, share what you've learned, share the adventure. And I always think I've been blessed in ways I could have never imagined back in the 60s. I could have never imagined the amount of fun I've had, the amount of friends I've had, and this big job has certainly done nothing to change my mind. Thank you, Charlie and Keith, for pushing me down this road. It's been a lot of fun and a very nostalgic ride so far. And as you can imagine, we are really looking forward to the warm weather of VSC. Actually, I'm looking forward to being in Daytona the week before VSC for Bike Week, but just to have some warm weather would be a thrill right now. So we hope we'll see you on the next DVD. Hope you'll share them. Hope you'll send us some photos of what you're building and what you're doing, and share the good times, share the bad times, and share our lives through the medium of DVDs. See you on the next one. AA meeting, bring that. I'll meet you down there.
I would put it on, but they might take pictures while I'm in between.
It looks like Buzz isn't wearing pants here. What's going on? What the hell photo op are we doing here?
Miss Ellie's sister.
Hey! Okay, Dave is up. We missed the beginning of the flight because we were doing Tom Morris's award. Well deserved. In every way you can be a positive contribution to the event. I sound like a broken record, but the man really does deserve it. Anyway, Dave, this is the 7th flight on a plane, on an official flight. 7 with my pet glow plug in here, my favorite squiff. Sounds like the glow plug was the reason last night's shut-off happened. Anyway, I'm sure Dave's going to go home one happy camper with this plane. This has that wing that we built on video, the composite wing, and I don't think he could be happier with a plane with 7 flights on it, and he's out here competing. Next up, Joe Adamusco with the Seafire. How many more after Joe? You got to go yet, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, it means you get the first flight tomorrow in a good air. Ooh. Joe Adamusco, first official. Tiger Cat Man makes a voodoo. Hey, yeah.
Yeah, you can. But what happens is you can suck a lot of fluid. Yeah, you'll pop your finger over it like that. Like sometimes we'll do it if we don't get enough prime in. But and you'll start hitting it with the starter and it won't go. So you'll just pop your finger over it. Well, the plane's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's a beauty.
Oh, you gotta get him up? Yeah, no, him. No, you wanna fly next? No, go ahead, he's up. Who's this? Him, yeah.
Now, guys, gonna give Ron a. Oh, we'll get this for sure.
He's got a metal tank in it.
Even Midgley helped them adjust the needle. Get out of the way, you. Oh man.
Yeah, you don't have any time to sit there and drone. There's no droning time out there. You always turn in, turn in. I mean, there's no time for droning out there.
Is that going to take a few more pounds off you during the race? I mean,
Few pounds of liquid?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll run your nerves a little better. It's going to keep the pilot a little more interested.
Is that going to favor anybody? Any of the
I
airplanes?
don't know. It'll probably favor us young guys because the old guys are going to get tired. You know, Tiger and Lockwood.